Hello, and welcome back to Shelf Talks, the podcast where we dive deep into the journey of female founders bringing their product based businesses to retail shelves. I'm your host, Roberta, and today we are diving into a sweet success story, one that started in the kitchen and found its way into the hearts and mouths of cookie lovers everywhere. I'm sitting down with Caroline McGinley, the founder of Gringuita Cookies, a brand known for its bold flavors and unapologetic approach to indulgence. Caroline went from baking cookies with a twist to building a buzzworthy brand that's turning heads and satisfying cravings. And I'm really excited to hear about how she did it and definitely how she entered the frozen space, which I know is challenging when it comes to retail stores. So, welcome, Caroline.
Thanks, Roberta. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. So let's just dive in. So, can you tell us a little bit about what your life even looked like before thinking about starting a brand?
Sure. Yeah. So I actually had never planned on starting my own business. I had never even heard of CPG. I was living in South America, teaching English as a second language, just kind of traveling and figuring out what I wanted to do with my life in my early 20s. And I was in Uruguay, actually, in Montevideo, and I moved there by myself. And by year 2 of living there, I started selling my cookies. I was first baking for my roommates who were all from South America, and they never really tried American style cookies. And then I started coming up with my own recipes. And one day I just started an Instagram page. And it's kind of a long story. It didn't really just like happen overnight.
Yeah,
It
no,
was a
this is
process.
great.
Yeah, and so I started selling my cookies, came up with original recipes, and saw that because nothing like what I was doing really existed. You see like kind of oversized gourmet cookies in the United States, and that has
Yeah.
really grown in the past 5 years. But in South America, you really didn't see anything like that, or at least all the way down in Uruguay, you really didn't see anything like that. And so I started getting orders every day.
Were they all local orders? And were you delivering them?
Okay, so in the very beginning, I obviously didn't have a car. So I would take boxes on a bus in the city and just deliver sometimes like an hour away from where I was located. And then I figured out like, okay, I need limits, I need to learn how to say no. I can't just take cookies
Oh,
travel for 2 hours.
right.
So I quickly realized that wasn't sustainable. And I started having just pickup orders from my apartment. And yeah, in order to prevent food waste, I started freezing the dough because I was selling the fresh baked cookies, not the frozen dough in Uruguay. So I was freezing the dough. That way, whenever I got an order, I would take it from the freezer, pop it in the oven, and always serve hot fresh baked cookies right before the pickup time, the designated pickup time. And that's where the frozen dough concept started. So I was actually doing that in Montevideo for about a year. I wasn't planning on leaving. I was selling the cookies in Spanish, which is not my first language. So that's why the name La Gringuita is so important to me. It means little American girl. It's like gringo. Even though, some people don't know how to pronounce it, it still is really important to the brand's story and how it all started. And, everybody will learn. I think it's okay. It's a long answer to your question, but I really never plan on starting a business. And it kind of just took over my life very quickly. And I wasn't planning on leaving Uruguay. I was planning on staying. And I ended up coming back to Florida, where I was born and raised, to quarantine during the pandemic. And I came back the day before the borders closed indefinitely. And I brought pajamas and a backpack. I left everything in Montevideo.
Thinking you were going to go back soon.
Exactly. On my Instagram, my cookie Instagram, I said pausing orders, but I'll be back. And that was March, beginning of March, early March of 2020. And by the summer, I started selling my cookies here.
I think it's really cool too how it just started in your kitchen and then you're like, oh, let me put it on Instagram, and then just getting organic community building in Uruguay.
Yes, absolutely. Kind of really listening to my customers and figuring out what they liked. It was so organic. It wasn't like, oh, I want this massive business and I'm, all of a sudden just going to bulldoze forward. It was very, very small steps. And so I could really kind of tweak things early on.
Yeah. What was early feedback like? What kind of feedback were you getting at the beginning?
Yeah, so I, in the very, like, still in Uruguay, was rotating my menu. So I very quickly understood what people liked and didn't like. And I also was able to continue being innovative with flavors. And so definitely the flavor, the palette is a little bit different in South America and in Uruguay than it is here in the US. There, I could definitely say all of my flavors with dulce de leche would just like fly, which is the milk based caramel. It's a huge part of Uruguayan culture compared to here, which I also started in a similar way in the United States, selling at farmers markets. So again, like very small and would get that direct feedback. And I mean, it was positive. I'm not going to lie. It was really good. I would get really good feedback and wouldn't really have to do too much to promote. I had, in Uruguay, and then same thing in the United States, in Florida, have very loyal customers, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah. What made you, when you came back to the States to quarantine and then thought about restarting it up in the US, what kind of sparked like, hey, you know what I was doing down there, I think I can replicate, in a way that's speaking to American consumers and growing it from the US?
Yeah. So at first I was like, no way will I start a business here. And it just seemed it's a little bit easier, I think, to do things out of your comfort zone when you're already out of your comfort zone. So when I was abroad, I was like, everything was kind of uncomfy, and it made me just constantly be able to really evolve as a human being, I think.
Yeah.
And then when I came back to my comfort zone, it was almost more difficult to be around friends and family from my past who didn't see me and identify me as an entrepreneur. So
Hmm.
I kind of had to, like, I had already changed, but then to come back and start something here was difficult. So at first I was like, no way. And then, it was kind of like weird times during the pandemic. It was a little chaotic and it felt scary, and that was real. So it was kind of having those existential conversations. And one day I was with a quarantine buddy, one of my childhood friends, and she was a big fan of my cookies and still is. And she came over to my parents' house, and I had the freezer loaded with cookie dough, of course, coming up with more and more flavors. I was just like constantly.
You were still
Oh,
like baking. Okay. So that passion never stopped. It was
yeah.
just kind of the business was on pause.
The business was on pause, but I was still on social media posting more of, making more content for my Uruguayan account because I still kind of had one foot in Uruguay still. So my friend came over and she was like, "Oh, I just ate. I don't want a cookie right now," because I'm always like, "Do you want a cookie?" Like I'll turn the oven on. And pretty much everyone. And she was like, "I don't want one right now," and I was like, no problem. And I took a dough ball and put it in a Ziploc bag and wrote with Sharpie, 13 to 15 minutes, 390 degrees, and here's your frozen dough ball. And so she didn't even have it immediately. She called me maybe a week or two later and was like, "Caroline, I'm in my house. I'm watching a movie on Netflix. My whole house smells like cookies. Like, sell the frozen dough." And it was just kind of like, it's just something really clicked. And that was, yeah, exactly my light bulb moment of just like, oh wow, because I didn't see myself doing exactly what I had been doing in Uruguay here. It just didn't feel right, like to have a brick and mortar, which is kind of what I was dreaming up in Montevideo. So doing something like that here, it's like, no, something feels wrong with that idea. And then it was like, oh, selling to supermarkets, like something feels very right. However, I had no idea about anything in the industry and how to make that possible. But I ended up reading a blog about Whole Foods and how they, buy local and buy from small suppliers. And I was like, that's great. I'm going to sell to Whole Foods.
So never before had you thought about retail stores until your friend said, "Hey, you need to sell the frozen balls." And then it's like, "Okay, let me just put them in a grocery store." That makes sense.
Yep, pretty much. And so, I was looking at like packaged goods that I had in my pantry, and I saw resealable stand-up pouches, and I was like, I want them in resealable stand-up pouches. And I started Googling, how do you get them in, how do you print stand-up pouches? Like, oop, that's expensive. Where can you find plain stand-up pouches? And so I started actually an Instagram page. So similar I started one here, and I just started posting photos of cookies, and I found on Google plain white stand-up pouches. And I just started sharpieing the flavors. I was selling the same flavors that had done really well in Uruguay, and I kind of condensed it down to 4 SKUs. I was like, if I'm selling in a supermarket, I can't have a dozen flavors. I need to fit on a shelf. So I came up with 4 flavors that I felt, kind of envelope your everybody's taste, like your super chocolatey one, the caramel one, the fruity one, and then classic chocolate chip. So I just started sharpieing the flavors and directions, and I started selling them just in Sharpie bags.
Were you selling them at that point, selling them frozen?
I was selling them frozen, and then I started, so in the very beginning, farmers markets actually weren't even open. And some that were still running weren't accepting new vendors. So I ended up doing, and super early on, in Jupiter, Florida, where I was born and raised, a neighborhood was helping out small businesses because like food trucks weren't able to post up in public places. The city wasn't allowing it. So this residential neighborhood started inviting small businesses, only food trucks, to people's homes. So we would park on their driveway, and it was private, so it wasn't within, the city's control. And then the whole neighborhood would come out for these food truck nights. And so I would set up, I didn't have a food truck, so I would just set up with a tent and a table and like a, bed sheet on top. I didn't even have any marketing, nothing. And so I was selling first, like kind of to get the cookies out into the world, some baked cookies. But then I had the frozen dough with me, and I was like, hey, this is a baked cookie. By the way, you could make it at home. And I still do that actually at farmers markets. Now I'm a little bit more sophisticated. I have a pretty nice setup, and I bring an oven and I bake the cookies on site from frozen.
That's so smart.
It smells really good. It draws a line. I still sell really just within Florida. So I have a pretty strong like Floridian audience, which is nice because that helps promote the sales in the stores that I'm not selling to.
Yeah. I think that's great too, because it easily identifies for consumers how easy it is to cook them at home. And then of course the aroma, I'm sure, just pulls people in. So
exactly. And then having to just try it, because maybe in a supermarket, it's hard to try a new product. I understand that. I'm that shopper. It's something, usually I need to see something multiple times, or sample it or hear that it's good from someone else. And that's pretty normal with shopping in grocery stores. It's hard to try something new with food.
Yeah.
So having that first bite, and then again, the cookies are really good. So after you try it, you're like, oh wow.
Yeah. I love to, I commend you for not knowing anything about retail, but still having a mindset to say, okay, I'm not going to have 10 flavors, although I can make 10. I'm going to focus on the ones that are the top ones in my assortment that I already know consumers love, and make a story around that. So that definitely commends you for even thinking that way and not wanting to throw the kitchen sink from the onset. Yeah. So after you have this kind of, vision to say, I want to be in Whole Foods, what were your steps in getting there? What did that look like?
Yeah, Whole Foods is pretty open on their website. They have, they kind of, I guess they don't tell you everything, but some steps are, your ingredient label. So I sourced good, clean ingredients. If I'm going to sell to Whole Foods, I'm sourcing clean ingredients, quality ingredients. And then I found information just on Google. Okay, so I need a license, I need a permit, I need a nutrition label, I need a UPC, and just kind of started working my way backwards. But pretty early on, I ended up getting printed bags, and I got it from a company here in the US. It's Packaging Lab. They print very small quantities. Actually, they have no minimum order. So you can print one printed bag if you wanted to. It would be pretty expensive. Great. But, so my first orders, I only ordered like 2,000 bags, so 500 of each SKU. And I hand drew my logo. The photo on my bags, it's my hands, my left hand, and then the camera in my right hand. And it's all very homemade, and it gets the job done. And I will have a rebrand at some point, but no, I didn't have, $10,000 to hire a professional to come up with a beautifully designed bag. So then I started with my packaging. I knew, obviously, okay, if I have the product, Whole Foods is not going to be my first customer. So that's crazy. I need also proof of concept. So I went around to the gourmet markets in the area. My very first sales call actually reached out to a really nice seafood market in this area. And I emailed them and I just asked, what do you look for in a product and what requirements do you have? And I already knew the FDA requirements, but I'm like, can you give me some tips and can you look at my nutrition label? And they met with me and they were so kind. They're still a customer of mine. And they were my very first wholesale account. And then I ended up selling to about a dozen gourmet markets up throughout South Florida. And I started in a smaller chain in Miami, but it is a full-blown supermarket. It's more conventional, so it's similar to a Publix. But at first they were like, your pricing is too premium. It's not going to work. And I was like, let me just try. I'll give you free products. I never heard of a free fill, but I was basically, I didn't know the right language. I didn't have the jargon,
Right.
but I asked if I could just give them free product and they said yes. And they asked me to not promote it just to see if it would sell organically. And it did. They also are still a customer of mine. So it wasn't like, okay, how do I get into Whole Foods tomorrow? It was kind of really like
starting small, proof of concept. Was that something that you had read about? Was that something that just, from a mindset standpoint, you just thought, let me start off in some local stores first?
It was a little intuitive. It made sense to me. I mean, there are many gourmet markets where there isn't, it's kind of just like a billboard for your brand. It's not like there are seas of product, sea of product where people are looking for something a little bit unique. There might not be as many dessert options. So maybe there are a couple of ice creams and then nothing else. So it was a good way to, not really have too much competition.
Yeah.
Is also how I saw it.
Yeah. Can we go back to, you talked a little bit about pricing and the fact that, your pricing was high in some of the retailers that you kind of were initially leaning into. What was your price and how did you initially determine what you wanted it to be?
I did want to be a premium product and I thought that early on. And the price is still premium. And I know that as I scale, I actually do have a goal that I would like to lower it to, but just it's not right now. I need some more scale in order to do that.
Yeah.
So right now I price the cookies at $3.75 per cookie, and it comes with a pack of 4, so it's $15. The recommended retail is $14.99, and they're huge cookies, so it's kind of competitive to our cookie franchise or all of the oversized cookies that are very popular right now that are going for about $5. So it's kind of training customers to compare it to a cookie that you would find at a bakery, not so much cookie dough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good connection because you're right. Like that's a great price in comparison to going out to one of the stores and just getting one cookie.
Exactly. And you're getting it fresh baked, warm out of the oven in the comfort of your home. And so it's almost like you're purchasing the experience as well. It's not just eating a cookie. Cookies are so nostalgic and it's something that you share. A baked good it's always, you can have it just yourself, but it's shareable. It's about connecting.
Yeah. So with that, once you were in those grocery stores to start off in the seafood market, were there any feedback that you received that was different from all the great feedback that you received prior to? Any changes you had to make?
Honestly, I really haven't made changes to my recipes. Moving forward, I already know what ways that I would like to change my packaging, but the cookies themselves have gotten great feedback. So I'm fortunate that way. I do really believe in my product. Yeah. And maybe I just meet really nice people. I'm not sure.
No, I think number one, you probably as well, like you had great amount of consumers that were already trying your product. So you had that already feedback that tasted great. And then you did it sounds like you really did your due diligence when it came to packaging to make sure that you had proper packaging when it came to being shelf ready. So I think those two things combined, I'm surely led into the fact that you didn't have to do any major changes, which is great.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's like what you were saying. I started so small. So I was really tweaking early on for, the whole year in Uruguay. And then when I came here, I was kind of like ready to take what I had tweaked.
Yeah. When you were in those groceries that you mentioned prior to going into Whole Foods, how were you making the cookies as well as delivering them?
Yeah. So I was renting space in other people's kitchens. So I was in like a shared commissary kitchen, like a ghost kitchen. And then I moved into a catering company's kitchen, which was a a little bit better of a situation because it wasn't so chaotic, and being in like such a shared kitchen that the catering company was, more laid back. They would come in for an event and then they would leave. And then from there, I moved into a bakery and used their equipment after hours because prior to that, I didn't have access to a commercial mixer. So my dough was pretty thick and I was making larger quantities, so like 30 pounds in a batch. And I was mixing that by hand, everything like in a really big bowl, and I was just mixing it. I did just over like 4,000 pounds of dough by hand. I was just delivering in big 90-quart coolers in my little Kia Forte, which I actually still do to the smaller stores that don't use my distributor. And then at one point in the bakery, I was purchased a 2-door freezer and I was able to store it there, but eventually that was not large enough. And I ended up getting a 3-door freezer that I stored in a friend's storage unit that had electricity. And so I was just constantly commuting, like bringing like massive amounts of cookie dough from the bakery to the storage unit. And I was like, oh my God, this has to change at some point. Which I knew.
Was it only you? This is all just you?
This is all me. And I was, popping up at all of the farmers markets. So I was just constantly driving, delivering, or making cookie dough, or at the market selling it. And then in 2023, a realtor that I had spoken with previously said like, hey, I have a 400 square foot space that's already built out as a kitchen. Are you interested? And I was like, oh God, I don't know if I can afford it, but it was already built out as, so it had the right flooring, the floor drain, electric, like everything that a kitchen needs for the correct permits. So I took out like a $20,000 loan through QuickBooks and bought some equipment, and I'm still in that space. And I ended up taking over the bay next door, so another 400 square feet, but that's where we make everything. So prior to all of this, since I had moved so many times and switched kitchens, I had to go through getting the license over and over again. So I was like, okay, this is a Grudy's, like Department of Ag, come and inspect, like it's fine. I know you guys, but I had no idea about SQF and getting audited for food manufacturing. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with that world.
No, can you explain what SQF is?
Yes, safe quality food. So FDA and at the state level, like the Department of Agriculture, they'll come and inspect, but it's really like once a year, maybe less, depending on what you're producing. Supermarkets have you hire a third-party company that's private. It's not through the government to come in and to audit you for food safety manufacturing. So usually people hire a consultant and they have a consultant come in and write the food safety policies for that company. And it goes to traceability, to having a policy for when glass breaks, and what are your steps. So it covers everything that you could ever imagine, but that information is not available online. So it's kind of like this barrier to entry. You almost have to pay somebody to tell you what they require before the audit. I have 100 at least pages of food safety policy written now for my kitchen. And it's things that I would never know that you would even need. And I actually lean pretty heavily on ChatGPT to pass my audits.
Really?
And yes, super interesting. It was so stressful because I didn't have somebody kind of looking over my shoulder telling me that I was doing it correctly.
Yeah, so you did it all yourself.
I did. And then after I got audited, I had some non-conformances is what they call it. Like my pest control light was too close to my mixers. Just like little things. And they call them non-conformances, and you have to fix them and then have the auditor look over it before you get certified. And so I did have a consultant who he helped me for free. I gave him cookie dough, and he just kind of like looked over my work and was like, "Yes, exactly. You have to do what you have to do."
Yeah, so. That's great that you figured that all out you and ChatGPT together figured that all out and saved yourself some money.
Yes, and I've seen other people use ChatGPT in interesting ways, like, "Hey, ChatGPT, will you read this document and make sure, like, be my lawyer or look out for me," and things like that. So I didn't use ChatGPT before going through my SQF audit. But after I realized how amazing it is
Yeah.
for, legalities or, just things that you would usually have to hire a professional for, it can be a little bit of a consultant for you.
Yeah, definitely a free consultant. Or, if you pay the extra fee for the advanced version.
That's true.
So tell me a little bit about the Whole Foods experience. So what did that look like coming out of kind of really, getting your gears in place into some of those local stores? When did you feel ready to even approach Whole Foods?
So I did actually. I started interviewing people that were already selling to Whole Foods pretty aggressively. It was just reaching out left and right, like, hey, you have your products in Whole Foods, can you talk to me about it? Some were big companies and some were, local businesses in the area. And pretty much everybody that I reached out to actually answered me and spoke with me. And a lot of the feedback was just email them like crazy. One woman told me that she emailed once a week for, however long, sent about like 1,000 emails. And I was like, I don't know, that doesn't really feel right for me. I'm like, that's not really my personality. And I started to send some emails. I got the forager's email and was like, hey, this could go. I didn't hear anything. But, I thought about Whole Foods every day. I had a photo of my cookie dough on a Whole Foods shelf as the background of my phone. I was just constantly
manifesting.
Yes. I mean, and taking action, but
yes,
not.
and taking action. Yep.
Yeah. So they were my goal, and I was just constantly thinking about it, constantly, every day was like, okay, a little bit closer, a little bit closer. I actually applied for their accelerator program. I was following, foragers on LinkedIn and all Whole Foods LinkedIn. And I saw that they had this accelerator program, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'll apply. Never going to get it, but obviously apply. And then, I get one email and it was like, oh, like you made it to the next round. Like, and then another email, like, oh, like send samples here. And then by the summer of 2023, I got an email saying that I was a finalist, you have this interview. And I was like, oh my God, that's terrifying. And then I was one of 10 companies in the country accepted into their accelerator program. Absolutely insane, especially with, I felt like, everybody talks about like imposter syndrome, but I was like, I'm a farmer's market brand, everybody else is so legit. Like there's so much more professional and sophisticated and they know what they're doing. But I had really already like been so obsessed. At that point, I definitely knew what consumer packaged goods were. And I had walked the fancy food show for the first time that summer of 2023 before finding out. I was very immersed. So looking back, I should have been a little bit nicer to myself, I think. But it was very intimidating. Everybody was so nice.
In your application to Whole Foods, what were the things that you think that really like got them excited to kind of move you to the next round?
Because I'm sure that some of it might be, trends and data.
Yes.
And then I do know that nobody is making a product like mine. Nobody is selling a 1/4 pound stuffed cookie in the form of frozen cookie dough. It does not exist. So I think it's interesting. It's innovative and it's emerging. And so I know that they've classified me as like an emerging brand more so than a local brand. So I think it's that kind of innovativeness.
Yeah.
And then also my story, I think is interesting on how I started it in South America. And that's something, I can really talk about. I'm very passionate about it. And I think maybe the two of those together, plus some data saying that cookies, might be trending, or I'm not sure. I think, oversized cookies are definitely doing very well right now.
Yeah. So when you were a finalist and you had to pitch, did you have help with your pitch? Did you do that all on your own? Did ChatGPT help you again on that one?
So I wasn't really using ChatGPT at that time. So no, I didn't have any help. I don't know if I told anybody about it. I think at that point I might have told my parents. Before being a finalist, I definitely didn't even tell my parents.
Oh, really? You kept it all to yourself?
I was like, if I speak this, it's not going to happen. It was kind of like, I got the email and I was like, oh, okay. And then kind of like, put it away, because otherwise I would have freaked myself out.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just like, oh, okay, that happened. Now I need to order or deliver to this gourmet shop. And yeah,
Back to business.
back to business. Yep.
So did you actually have to go there to pitch? Was it a virtual pitch? Like, what did that look like?
It was virtual. It was, yep, it was, I actually I don't remember how many details they gave me beforehand. I had to prepare a PowerPoint, and I presented the PowerPoint. I'm sure that they gave me a time limit, and it was with, and I didn't, really know everybody in the meeting yet, but, the head of Leap, so like Kelly Landrew and then my forager and the category merchant, and I can't remember the investment. It might have just been them, but maybe one or two more people. So it was a lot of people looking at me.
Yeah. A little intimidating.
It totally was. Yeah, I just kind of like leaned into what felt authentic to me, and I really feel like that was what worked.
Yeah.
Because I was very excited and passionate. And I remember afterwards I asked some questions, but they were like, I think somebody mentioned like how passionate I seemed or something along those lines. Just and I feel like that because I just leaned into my authenticity and kind of, just designed like a cute little PowerPoint that felt like very real to me.
Yeah. What were the key things that you had in your PowerPoint? I'm sure you talked about your story. Did you also give them an assortment layout of what you envisioned the products to be in store?
Yes, I do actually remember at the end of the presentation just having a map of the United States and Whole Foods logo and my logo just all over it with my SKUs and just how I wanted to sell. So yeah, I definitely was like, this is my dream. And it was true.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's not like I don't want to sell to other natural grocers. Of course I do, but I had really been, thinking and dreaming about selling to Whole Foods from day one.
Yeah. So then once they said yes, like we want you in our stores, I know you talked a little bit about a distributor. Is that when you had to get a distributor?
So I didn't have to. That was a decision of mine. I did not want to work with the big guys like UNFI and KeHE. And I actually am still happy with where I am right now. I joke I'm getting paid. So I just hear a lot of stories about small suppliers getting swallowed and, just really not making money when they work with the very, very large distributors.
Yeah.
So early on, I actually met a sales rep from Gourmet Foods International at one of my farmers markets. And he was like, wow, this is a great product. I could so see GFI carrying this. And I had meetings with him and he was like, these are the margins that we look for. This is kind of like your case size. And I was like, early on, I actually got my cases sized for me before I was even needing to have my product in cases. I was very far away from selling pallets, but so I had those conversations with him. And then when I knew that Whole Foods was going to launch me in the South Florida stores, I reached back out to him. I said, I finally have my Anchor account. And then, so I onboarded with both Whole Foods and GFI at the same time. It was pretty stressful. Again, just, lots of paperwork. I didn't have anybody looking over my shoulder. So didn't know if I was doing things correctly, and you just kind of have to do it anyways. But I did have a lot of help from Whole Foods going through the accelerator.
Oh, that's great.
So great. So, and I went through the accelerator before launching with Whole Foods. So I got lucky that way. It could have happened simultaneously, but with frozen desserts with a category review, I wouldn't have launched until April of the following year. So I had a gap between the accelerator and actually launching. And then I still had conversations with my forager, and there was a lot of help from Whole Foods. So that was really great. And then, I had to figure out how to get certified with SQF and how to put my cookie dough cases on pallets and wrap them. Mm-hmm. And the first time around it was a really bad experience. They toppled. But it's okay.
Yeah, you figured it out.
Yep.
You figured it out. That's great. So once you're kind of on shelves, was there any major differences with being in a Whole Foods versus being in the other groceries that you didn't expect?
Yeah. So something that I didn't expect, well, I knew, and before launching, I asked for the expected velocity, which was a really great key information to have. And it is, the gourmet markets do almost sell at a higher velocity because again, there isn't that much competition.
Hmm.
And I have been selling there in some of these stores for, almost 5 years now. So Whole Foods, the velocity, especially for the frozen dessert set, is a little bit slower. And then something that I didn't know really up until kind of recently was, why it would sell out and not get restocked. And I thought there was, some type of disconnect between my distributor and Whole Foods, and really what it was, and something that I'm learning from other founders reached out to me and said, you actually kind of have to be more proactive than you think as a founder, or, it would be either hiring like a third party to merchandise and make sure that you're still on shelf. But it's not so much my distributor isn't not delivering. They're just not getting the orders. And I do know AI is part of the equation with reordering. So I was surprised that I had to be more hands on about making sure that my product was getting.
Yeah. So how did you do that?
It's a kind of, so with Whole Foods, I do get my sales data. And so if I could, you know, figure out from the data if it's
How much inventory is left?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, I don't have the inventory numbers, but I have the sales. So I can know, okay, if it sold this much, now we're out of stock and it should be restocked, or kind of just going to some of the stores that are closer by. And then also demoing in the stores and introducing myself and making sure that the team members know me and know my product.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they don't. It's overwhelming with how many products are in the store.
Mm-hmm. I think that's great too, because when you're going to the store, introducing yourself, talking about your brand, now it's top of mind for the associates and they're looking for it now and making sure that it's placed properly in its home once they do get the inventory.
Definitely. And they get excited. It's fun for both of us, really. And, it's really cool to meet somebody who has made something that's sold on shelf. So I think it's nice to have.
Yeah. So now that you have entered kind of your dream retailer, I know you said you want to go to others, definitely. What's next for La Gringuita? What do you envision for the future?
I'm kind of like in a limbo of, or, I don't really know if the answer is to raise money and just, bulldoze forward, or if it's to continue to grow at a slower pace. I'm excited to sell to more natural grocers. Really would love to get out of the state of Florida, because right now we're just in Florida stores.
Yeah.
So that is what I'm working on right now. And it's challenging, I think, being a one-man team.
So it's still just you.
It is still just me. So we'll see. I'm still figuring that part out.
Yeah. I think the good thing is that you have now historical data in regards to like the progression of the brand in regards to expanding to more stores. You have the sales that you can showcase and show to other retailers, because that, of course, is a billboard. When you're in some stores now, others want you. So you have that kind of credibility in your back pocket to utilize as you're starting to talk to more retailers, especially getting out of Florida into more states.
I completely agree. I think it'll only build on itself.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention how at the Fancy Foods, when you went back, you received the award for the Next Generation Leader by the Specialty Food Association. So congratulations on that.
Thank
That's
you.
Pretty amazing. How did that feel?
It was another one of those, like, what's happening? What? And they did such a good job at the award ceremony, just making it a really big deal. And we got really big, heavy trophies.
Oh, really?
It was the craziest thing. It was very, very, very cool. And it just, I think it's going back to how I started, where my headspace was in the very beginning, when I was pretty unsure of myself and, like, who am I to start a business? feeling a little crazy because I didn't have anybody in my circle or in my family that had started businesses. And, you're just kind of like, I'm used to being the black sheep, but you feel it. You feel a little weird. And so to get that validation from
Mm-hmm.
the community and, for them to basically say, like, you're not so weird. So keep
We
going.
love you.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love that. That's so exciting. So, if
Thank
you
you.
can let our listeners know where they can continue to follow you, share your journey, hear your journey, and of course, purchase La Gringuita cookies.
Yes. So nationally, you can purchase online. I do ship. Follow Gringuita_cookies. And if you're in Florida, all South Florida, Whole Foods in Jacksonville, and a bunch of markets in the area. And hopefully, if you are out of state, you will be able to find Gringuita cookies in a store near you
Excellent.
soon. Hopefully.
It will happen. We're going to
Thank you.
manifest it and we're going to put action
Yes.
towards it, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Caroline, for coming on. It's a great conversation. And I'm just really like impressed, honestly, by like all that you've done, especially, not really having any background, but really just figuring it out and being successful at it. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.